Hello, welcome back to Movies with Tana, where today I'm gonna talk about the next two Pink Panther movies that Peter Sellers starred in. Every time I try to record one of these episodes, I get instantly nervous. I I play these back in my head, practicing. Okay, this is what I'm gonna say and everything. But once you start actually having to talk to the camera, it's a whole other ordeal. So I'm just gonna look down at my notes and try and get through this without sounding too awkward. So, a little bit of a disclaimer first. I don't know everything about movies. I like movies. I like the idea of making movies. I've made a few movies. I've made a few videos. I've seen a lot of movies and I've learned a lot about movies. And yeah, this show is just about me talking about them and what I like about them. And hopefully, you watch this and you get a little information about the movie and you go to choose to see it for yourself. I'm not going to cough a lot in this episode. I have my water right here. So I'm going to keep drinking the water so I don't have to keep cutting out my coughs. Hopefully, I don't finish the bottle before the episode gets done. Okay. Let's start with The Pink Panther Strikes Again. This is the direct sequel to The Return of the Pink Panther, which came out in 1973, and The Pink Panther Strikes Again came out in 1976, which is also coincidentally the same year that the movie which I talked about in the very first episode of Movies with Anna, Choti Si Baat, came out. So I think it's just really fascinating that both these movies came out in the same year and just how drastically different they are. And it made me think about how all over the world at any given time, and like so many people are making all sorts of movies, and it really doesn't matter where you're from or anything. As long as you have a really good idea for a movie, you just make it, and it's timeless. Like, I've talked about two movies from the 70s now, and they're both as good as any movies I would watch today, and I'd probably pick these movies over any movies that I see today. Not all, but a few of the movies that I see today, I would definitely pick these to watch, easily. Okay, Pink Panther Strikes Again. We'll just get through the credits for that. It was again directed by Blake Edwards, as were the previous movies. It was written by Blake Edwards again, but also written by Frank Waldman this time, which his same co-writer from the previous movie, which is definitely a testament to how good this movie is. Because if you remember the first one, The Pink Panther, which came out, is not a movie I enjoy. I didn't think it was very good at all. But The Return of the Pink Panther, one of my favorite movies, and this is definitely a close second or a close third, just because of how well done the story is and how good the writing is for Clouseau and the other characters, and even the plot wise, it's really not The Return of the Pink Panther, because I think they just got a perfect storm of actors, story, and just the right jokes also in that one. But it's definitely up to that caliber, if nothing else. Okay. Waldman and Blake Edwards they wrote the story. Peter Sellers is back as Clouseau. You have Herbert Lom playing Dreyfuss, and he has a much bigger role in this movie. You have Bert Kwok, who plays Cato. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. You have Leslie Ann Down, who plays Olga. She plays a relatively smaller role than I thought. A lot of these characters in the movie kind of come and go very quickly, because the main focus of the story is on Clouseau and Dreyfuss and kind of their adventures throughout the story. So you have Leslie Ann Down as Olga, and you have Leonard Rossiter as Queenan. And they say his name a little bit differently in the movie, but I can't say it in that French accent. But you have characters like them who are integral to the story, but really not the focus of the story by any means. Cinematography is done by Harry Waxman in this time, instead of let me check that, instead of Jeffrey Unsworth in the previous movies. So the visual style, that's I think one of the main things of the movie that doesn't really stack up to the previous one is just how good the cinematography was in the previous one. I have to make sure I don't say the first one because then people will think I'm talking about the Pink Panther. But actually, I've written down in my notes, I refer to them as PP1, PP2, PP3, and PP4. And I think it'll be a little bit easier to refer to the movies as that. PP1 is the Pink Panther, the original one, which I didn't really like. PP2 is the Return of the Pink Panther, which is my favorite movie. PP3 is the Pink Panther Strikes Again. And PP4 is the Revenge of the Pink Panther, which is the movie we're going to talk about next. So if I don't feel like saying the full name, I'm just gonna say that, and that's what that means. So cinematography is by Harry Waxman. It's good. It's definitely not, you know, like nothing to frown about. It's very very good. It has a lot of the same style and energy and dynamicness as the previous movie, but there's something about the last movie and the way that last movie was shot that I don't think is very easy to match up to, and this movie doesn't really match up to it. But it's sort of like Harry Waxman was given a handbook to how to film in this Pink Panther style, and he did his best trying to replicate it. He definitely had some parts of the style which were more of his own, I felt, than the previous movie. But uh, that previous movie it's too much of a favorite of mine for me to think that this movie did it a little bit better. If anything, it's just up to par with that. But still, again, like I said, nothing to shy at. And okay, so now we'll talk about the title sequences. So, title sequence. The it's so difficult to talk on camera. The title sequence in this movie is not as good. A lot of this movie is okay. No, to be fair, this movie is really good. It's much better than I thought it would be. It has a few idiosyncrasies that make it a little bit strange to watch if you're not really excuse me, if you're not really prepared yourself mentally for what's gonna happen, because it's a quite a different movie from the first two. And with that comes some, you just have to have some allowances for some of the things this movie tries to do, which it doesn't really pull it down so much as it just confuses you as a viewer. So the title sequence is fairly simple on the face of it. Definitely not as creative as the one in The Return of the Pink Panther, but probably as good as the rest of the title sequences are. Definitely, in most regards, The Return of the Pink Panther is going to stand out for me, but this is really, definitely shines on its own as a very good title sequence. It's a little bit tongue in cheek. It has the animated Clouseau following the Pink Panther throughout a movie theater. And as he's following through the movie theater, the Pink Panther obviously tricks him into sitting in a seat, and then the animated Clouseau watches quite like a few this like montage of the Pink Panther being in different pop culture references like King Kong. Then there's Batman. There's The Sound of Music. There's Singing in the Rain. All of these different references, and then it ends with Clouseau being trapped on the screen. It's just really simple. It's quite short, and they have a little. They do this thing where with each pop culture reference, they like just add a twinge to the Pink Panther, the classic Pink Panther theme, to kind of fit in with the thing. So like Sound of Music gets a little bit of a Sound of Music twinge with the Pink Panther theme. Same thing with Batman. Same thing with the King Kong. And it was cute. It wasn't like the visual drama and the visual style and pizzazz of the second one, but it wasn't bad. It was fine. So that's the title sequence. Just fine. But that's when you come into the live action part of this movie, I think is where it really picks up, because it's, again, the comedy on these movies is top notch. It's so good. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of an intro to this story, but I'm not gonna get into a lot of the specific details of the story, because just like The Return of the Pink Panther, I really encourage you guys to watch this movie because there's such delights of movies, and the original Pink Panther is a give or take. You don't really have to watch it, but the Return of the Pink Panther and the Pink Panther Strikes Again, I definitely do recommend you watch because they're such comedy delights and they leave you in such a good mood after you watch them that talking about them in too much detail and spoiling some of the jokes of the movie is something that I feel will just be a big disservice to it, because a lot of these jokes you just need to see it to believe it, and describing them kind of takes away the punch. But I'll do my best to kind of give you as much info about the movie as I can without spoiling any of it. So, this movie takes place 3 years after the events of The Return of the Pink Panther. So, in The Return of the Pink Panther, Dreyfuss goes absolutely fucking mad trying to kill Clouseau because he is just so frustrated with his complete ineptitude. And Herbert Lom plays this like sentiment to perfection. He has the like that, this giggle, and he has this like eye twitch thing that he does, and it's so funny. It's so perfectly done that you'd really believe that like, Dreyfuss is so annoyed and so done with Clouseau that he's officially being driven mad by this guy. And after he tries a few assassination attempts in the previous movie, he gets admitted to a, a psychiatric facility, which is how the second movie ends. It's not really a spoiler because there's a whole other part of the story that's the main story. This is somehow it's a subplot that has now transformed itself into a whole main plot of this movie, which I think is another just great thing about these movies, is that there's so many little things going along in the subplot wise that any of it can be just picked up and then being expanded into a larger concept, which is exactly what happened here. In the previous movie, Dreyfuss's insanity, let's call it, was a subplot. It wasn't the main plot of the movie. The main plot of the movie was Clouseau looking for the person who stole the Pink Panther. And Dreyfuss's insanity was just kind of a side plot thing that was happening along with the journey, and it felt organic because it felt like it was really, you felt like Dreyfuss is absolutely at his wit's end and he's trying to figure this out. So when it ends with him in the psychiatric hospital, it feels like a very satisfying ending for his character. But 3 years later, they've managed to expand this concept and now fully explore Dreyfuss's character and his full insanity. So the movie starts with Dreyfuss at the end of a 3 year stint in a psychiatric hospital. It's his last day. He's seemingly fully cured. He is ready to go back out into the world and get his job back as chief inspector. In the meantime, Clouseau has been upgraded. I was about to say he's been promoted to chief inspector himself, and he's like a little bit older. Peter Sellers is also quite a few years older in this. You can tell that he's a little bit older, but everything, as soon as Sellers walks on screen and crashes into Dreyfuss in the hospital, it just goes back to normal. So everything seems fine for Dreyfuss. He's all good, and then right as he's thinking about, oh yes, this is my final day here, Clouseau walks around and just immediately causes mayhem and causes Dreyfuss to just go mad all over again. And it's from the beginning, it's so funny because something about the way Sellers is able to communicate his physical comedy is just spectacular. He does it like nobody else I've ever seen. Okay, so excuse me. See, these coughs never stop. The One of the main things about this movie that works really well is that it has a lot of the perks of a good sequel. Wherein the fact that since it's a direct sequel to Return of the Pink Panther, it can carry along a lot of those characters, a lot of those plot lines, a lot of those themes from the previous movie. So the first thing which I noticed off the bat while watching it was the infamous Cato scene where Cato always attacks Clouseau when he returns back to his apartment. is just they find a way always to put a new spin on it, and every movie that I watch, and it's always a highlight for me as in each movie. And I understand now after watching all four of these movies why he's such a famous and iconic character. It's because they constantly find new things to do with this guy. And you see it in this movie where in Return of the Pink Panther, it was kind of a fresh idea that Cato is this guy who just keeps attacking Clouseau whenever he returns home. But in this movie, since you're already introduced to the idea, you kind of get this evolution of the scene where Clouseau looks around at the previous spot. Like in the last movie, Cato hides in a fridge. So the first place that Clouseau checks is the fridge, and you kind of get this like, oh, okay, now he's figured out Cato's old tactics. So he's trying to figure out where Cato will hide now, and see if Cato's hiding in any of his old spots. They also show like briefly. That's another great thing about this movie is that nothing is on the nose. I say this, but there is something that's on the nose later on. But nothing is directly pointed out. It's all part of the scene naturally, and the fact that it's there in the reality of the scene is what makes it funny. There's a cupboard that Clouseau has in his house, which is just full of these old school weapons like bamboo swords and stuff like that, and it's just so ridiculous because then the fight scene does commence with Cato revealing himself at a certain point, and the whole fight, they don't hit each other once. They only proceed to completely destroy his apartment. And I feel like that's the most standout thing about the Cato scenes is that it's violence without violence. It's this like fun movie violence where they don't actually end up hurting each other ever. They only just destroy his apartment every time he comes home. And the only time that I think Clouseau ever gets a hit is when he tricks Cato into answering the phone and convinces him that the fight is over. And that's the only time that Clouseau is able to get the upper hand is when someone is not paying attention to him. And I think that's just a really cute tongue-in-cheek way of evolving this like it's such a simple idea and such a simple scene, but they just keep adding a little bit of detail to it and then made it so much better. Yes. So another great thing about this movie in terms of its like sequel perks is that this movie really gets to, along with the story, also accommodates this a lot, but it really gets to explore Clouseau as a detective outside of the Pink Panther heist. So normally you associate the Pink Panther, Clouseau, he's hunting for the diamond and that's it. So whenever he's doing that, he's visiting the museum, he's looking for a jewel thief. He's not really allowed to detect anything else. And in this movie, they allow him to detect something else. They allow him to do some interrogations and stuff like that. And oh my god, I don't understand how this is like just the most famous reference for how to do a comedy interrogation scene, because I was literally laughing the entire scene, like screaming laughing. It was so funny. There is a point in the story where a professor and his daughter are kidnapped from their house, and to investigate this, Scotland Yard calls down Clouseau from Paris, and Clouseau then proceeds to go around the house, interrogating the staff of the house, and it's a brilliant comedy of just complete errors and ineptitude, because Clouseau is like, how Peter Sellers has evolved his character is incredible, because in the first movie you get hints to Clouseau's ineptitude, and it's just the fact that he's not a very good detective and not a very bright guy. But in this movie, it just carries on because you know all of these things about Clouseau. So how do you build on something that you know? You just double down on it, and you double down on the fact that Clouseau thinks that he's a really smart guy, and it's only the people around him that can see how insane he is. So when you do that and you have Clouseau getting frustrated with the fact that people are astounded by him, it just adds another level of just hilarity to his character, because he'll again his brilliant accent of like Rome, has anyone seen the Rome? And like people will point that out to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I know I said that." And that's a great running joke throughout the thing is that people will say, "You what's a phone? What's a phone?" He's like, yeah, a phone. Do you have a phone? You said phone. Do you mean phone?" He's like, "Yes, that is what I said." It's the things like that, just little points and brilliant uses of slapstick comedy that just really elevate this movie and give Clouseau a real chance to like play around in a new environment that's not necessarily just the same hunting for the Pink Panther diamond, because Pink Panther diamond doesn't really come up in this movie at all. It's all about Clouseau versus Dreyfuss, and that just I feel like is it was a perfect evolution of exploring Clouseau as a detective, exploring this storyline of Clouseau, the inept detective, and yeah, it's just top notch. That is one of the highlights of this movie is how they've managed to evolve Clouseau's character and somehow make it just as funny as a Return of the Pink Panther, if not a little bit funnier. There are some scenes where I laughed a little bit harder than I did with Return of the Pink Panther, but just a few. Overall, Return of the Pink Panther still my favorite for sure. Okay, now I want to talk to you about Dreyfuss. So Dreyfuss in the previous movie doesn't get a lot of screen time and not a lot of character moments. There's no character development per se in any of these movies, but there is some beautiful character moments. And in this movie, Dreyfuss gets his time to shine. It's just so good. He is the main villain of this movie. He escapes from the psychiatric hospital, and he just goes. If he was crack before, this is just full on crack, and he turns into like this over the top, very comical villain, and who plans to make a doomsday machine and just goes to absolute balls to the wall to figure out a way to get rid of Clouseau. That's his only goal, is just that. And as the movie goes on, you see him trying to figure out what he's gonna do once Clouseau is killed, because even he doesn't know that. And it just shows that this guy, as much as he hates Clouseau for being inept and being this, complete idiot, he doesn't really have much of an idea of what he's going to be doing later on as well. And just it's really fun to see Herbert Lom play this character, because I think he does such a great job in towing the line between this angry, like a normal person who just has to deal with Clouseau and has gone so insane with that, but also this insane guy who has like twitches and these weird laughs, and who has the most insane ideas for how to accomplish things. Like, so in the very beginning, Dreyfuss's plan revolves around getting a bunch of the world's best criminals together and kind of forming his own little organization to take down Clouseau. And the way he decides to do that is, for one of the criminals he decides to recruit, a bank robber, who's actually Queenan, who I mentioned before, and they say his name differently in the movie, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But to retrieve him, he has this guy climb up onto the roof of a moving train, and then he flies a helicopter above that train, and Keenan is supposed to just grab on to the helicopter while Dreyfuss lowers himself and then flies away. Like, that's insane. That's the most insane thing ever. And the fact that they show this actually happening. They have a stunt guy who gets on top of a train, moving train, grabs onto a helicopter, and then they just fly him like 2 feet off the ground, and then they cut it. But I mean, they showed it, and that's just a testament to how nuts Dreyfuss's character is written and what he gets himself into. But it's not done in a way that's like, oh my god, who is this guy? He's so weird. It's done with constant, awareness of this is supposed to be funny. This is really funny. That's why we're doing this. This is all for this big joke that we're doing, and that's the point of this movie, is to be hilarious. and that's something that's really important that sometimes gets lost in like comedy movies like this, especially sequels. Just trying to get the biggest or the best of, where they lose sight of the joke. This movie doesn't have that. With all of Dreyfuss's moments, even like big moments like these where it's like super insane, or even little moments where he'll walk away he'll in the scene blocking, he'll walk from point A to point B and something will happen, like he'll get caught on something, and that's just enough because it fits so well into the reality of this movie, is that everyone is taking this seriously in the story, and but insane things keep happening and comedic things keep happening, so you can't help but just laugh because it breaks the tension of what these serious characters are like supposedly experiencing. It's a confusing concept to explain, that's why you really have to watch it to kind of understand it, but uh, this movie always knows that it's trying to tell you a joke, and I love that about it. Okay. Okay, so the final thing I want to say about the sequel benefits of this movie is that it increases the scope dramatically. I was thinking about this actually because, to be fair, the Return of the Pink Panther does take you to a few different parts of the world. It takes you to Sweden, takes you to Lugash, but it takes you there with different characters, and it doesn't really have the same sense of scale that this movie has for some reason. Maybe because this movie is the movie that includes America, and you get to see inside the Oval Office and stuff like that. Um, excuse me while I take a sip of water so that I don't have to cough on camera again. This movie takes you to America, takes you inside the Oval Office, and you get to see a really comical version of the US president as part of the story. And I feel like that really just gives this movie a sense of tremendous scale. Just that the fact that, Clouseau also is roaming around a few different places. And yeah, it just feels like a bigger movie. And it goes beyond the Pink Panther diamond, like I already said, and it just focuses on these two brilliant characters that were set up in the previous movie, which were Clouseau and Dreyfuss. Do I have any time? Oh, I'm almost running time. I'm running out of time on this clip, so I'm gonna cut it here and get right back. And Canon strikes again. They have that 30-minute recording limit. 30-minute recording limit. They have that, and I can't do anything about it. So I have to always stop my videos here. My ringer is on. That's unprofessional. I hope nobody heard that. Anyways, the next thing I want to talk about in reference to the Pink Panther Strikes Again is the visual style. Now, this is something that I have a few examples for, but I don't really want to get into it because it's a lot of the things which I want to talk about are very relevant to the story. And again, just want you guys to watch this movie. And this would, I don't want to spoil it. It makes no sense to spoil it because so much of it is in visual references and things you have to see to understand, and like visual gags and slapstick comedy. So trying to talk about it and just trying to describe it feels like it's a big disservice to the movie. So yeah, I'm not gonna do that. But visual style. This movie is split across two different characters. You have scenes with Clouseau and you have scenes with Dreyfuss. So the scenes with Clouseau have a really interesting visual style for me. Is that I think they've done something really smart with this. I'm not sure which James Bond movies were coming out around this time, but I'm sure some were definitely coming out around this time. And all of Clouseau's scenes. Excuse me. I'll ask Michelle to cut that out for me. That was a big cough. Yes. So as I was saying, all of Clouseau's scenes across the movie have this very Bond-esque style. I think the simplest way to describe it is that all of Clouseau's scenes are shot in the way that if they were in a Bond movie, but instead of Bond being in those scenes, Clouseau's in those scenes. So those scenes instantly become hilarious. And a few of the story points are also adjusted to kind of make it a little bit funnier. So there's a scene in the movie where Clouseau is hunting down a clue, and Clouseau's hunting down a clue. He finds himself at a club, and in a more traditional movie, spy movie, or in a Bond movie also, you would think that, oh, it's a very fancy nightclub with really beautiful people walking around, and he meets a femme fatale at the at the bar, and it's this very like sultry evening that's gonna take place. But no, Clouseau finds himself at a drag bar, and they open the shot with a older man, a middle-aged man, lighting a cigarette and then putting a cigarette into the mouth of a much younger man, not too young but definitely younger, and lighting his cigarette. And in between the cigarette going inside of the mouth of the young guy and the old guy lighting it, right in between those two guys, their heads, you see Clouseau walk into the bar, and you're like, oh my god, he has no idea what he's just walked into. And then it proceeds into this brilliant scene where it's almost like they planned it out like that, where they set it up where he walks into the bar, he has the same interactions Bond or like some macho movie hero would have, but it's all twisted in the sense that he's in this drag bar and he has no idea he's in the drag bar. So everyone around him is interacting with him like they would in a drag bar, but he's interacting like he is in some sort of spy movie. At least he thinks he's in some sort of spy movie. He takes it all very seriously, which is the perfect way to have his character react to all of these situations. Because, as in any of these bar scenes, he sits down for the show and the show starts, and his complete shock and like just confusion when he realizes that he's not at a show where a woman is performing, but in fact a drag queen, is a perfect sequence of just Peter Sellers doing his best confusion acting. And I think um, moments like that, where you have Clouseau being put into these very serious and very spy-like moments, and just having him, just showcase his complete ineptitude is a great visual. I keep losing my train of thought with this because I just keep getting lost in my memories of the movie, and I keep replaying the scenes in my head. But yeah, it's a Bond movie without Bond and Clouseau in the middle, and that just makes it hilarious. And there's no other way to describe it than other than it's just funny. It's just funny because it's such simple, basic humor on the face of it, but it's humor that anyone is going to find funny because it's nice slapstick humor. It's not necessarily at anyone's expense. It's always happening to Clouseau. That's the best thing. Clouseau is the perfect punching bag for the audience because he is the everyday man of the story. He's taking the whole thing so seriously, and when just by the fact that everything happens to him, and he's the one who gets affected by all the jokes, no one feels like they're getting offended. No one sees themselves in Clouseau because Clouseau is supposed to be the escapist character. Not even escapist. He's almost the inverse of an escapist. He's like, oh, I don't want to be Clouseau, and that's why it's funny when things happen to him. The audience is the people who are around Clouseau and watching him just, behave in the way that he behaves and hear his funny accent. And it's such an interesting way to use a character where he is the butt of all the jokes, and that's what's funny about it, is that he doesn't get it but we get it. So when you see him interacting with anyone or doing anything, it's just never fails to be hilarious because the jokes are harmless and they're always at the expense of anyone but the viewer. And I think that adds a lot to why, at least I find these movies very universally funny. I don't know if that's something that everyone will agree with, but it's definitely something that I think I noticed while watching these movies. This water is not really helping with my cough, but I'm just gonna keep drinking it because coughing is hurting my throat. I'm gonna keep the bottle slightly open from now on. Okay, Dreyfuss's visual style. Dreyfuss, on the other hand, now he's almost the complete inverse, which is why I think this movie sometimes is so brilliant. Blake Edwards has a few hit and misses, but the guy really knows what he's doing when he has a good story. Um, Clouseau is shot exactly like a Bond movie, but with Clouseau, so he's definitely not Bond. But Dreyfuss is like the most pure, like extremist version of a Bond villain. But all of his scenes are shot like a comedy. They're shot very plainly, very wide, very statically, and all of the jokes in that scene in any of Dreyfuss's scenes are like physical jokes or slapstick jokes and jokes where Dreyfuss interacts with something and then something happens to Dreyfuss. It's very different from uh, Clouseau scenes, wherein Clouseau scenes are shot more seriously. Dreyfuss's scenes are shot with a little bit more fun added to them. Like Dreyfuss is constantly playing this humongous organ very dramatically, and you just can't help yourself but laugh thinking about it. Also, it's just he's pounding away on this organ, and it makes no sense that he's pounding away on this organ. And whenever somebody comes into the room and talks to him, he's always surprised by the fact, even though he's probably the one who summoned them to come and talk to him, and they always surprise him when he's playing the organ, and I find that really funny. And there's one specific moment in the movie where he has to torture somebody, and this is something that's stuck in my brain since I was a kid. And I didn't once I saw this movie, I realized I had seen it when I was much younger, and I didn't remember anything about it except for this scene, is where Dreyfuss has to torture somebody in order to get somebody else to do what he wants him to do. And he says, okay, we're going to go into this room now. And you think, oh my god, is this movie going to get serious now? What's he going to do? He's going to torture her? That torture's a big, like, how are they going to make torture funny? And he pulls out a blackboard. No, he pulls out this glove, this like claw glove. It's very freaky looking. It almost looks like a dragon hand or something. And he's like, okay, get the earmuffs on, and they get the earmuffs on. And Dreyfuss's idea of torture to get what he wants is not any sort of physical torture, but he takes that clawed glove and he runs his fingers down on a blackboard and causes that horrible shrieking sound that you hear. And that's what convinces the person he needs to convince to do what he needs him to do. And I think that's just so hilarious. And that's such a perfect twist on how to make torture funny. Because it's not really torture. I mean, if anything, the person he's torturing should just be fine with it. It's just a sound. Just, sing or just scream and cover up the sound with your own voice. But the fact that it ends up working is just like, yeah, that was the perfect way to handle a torture scene in this sort of movie. And I really that scene is one of the standouts for me in this movie. It just I don't know what to say. There's so many little moments like that, but the Cato scene, the torture scene, the drag club scene, all of these little moments definitely stand out to me. And it's for that reason why I really like this movie, is because even though overall it has a lot of some things are not as good as others, some parts don't really have the same effect on me as the previous movie did, it still definitely stands on its own and can easily be somebody else's favorite Pink Panther movie, because it's packed full of so many great moments and it's shot beautifully that I feel like it's just as much of a classic as the previous movie was. It has the same it has same level of great jokes. I mean, that interrogation scene. If you do watch this movie, that's something you have to look out for, because I've mentioned like 3 highlights already, but that's, I mean, 100% one of my favorite parts is the whole movie. And shooting wise and just cinematography wise, definitely different from the previous movies. So I don't know if I would necessarily call it better or worse. It's just different. It stands on its own. It has a few of the same visual ideas and visual language from the previous movie, but it definitely stands on its own a lot of the time because it deals with a lot of different subjects and a lot of different scenarios. So I feel like that also helps it kind of stand out on its own and be its own thing, So I think that's it for the Pink Panther Strikes Again without spoiling too much. And yeah, please go watch this movie. It's definitely worth it. It's definitely a good thing to watch if you want more Pink Panther after watching the favorite Return of the Pink Panther. And yes, I thoroughly enjoyed watching this movie. But with all good things comes a few bad things, and the bad thing that I had to sit through was Revenge of the Pink Panther. This movie came out in 1978, again directed by Blake Edwards, and man, this guy has a lot of hit and misses, and I think it comes down to the writers that he has. He wrote this movie again, he had Frank Waldman again, but he also had a guy called Ron Clark, and that guy definitely bogged this movie down in one way or the other. Or he saved it, I don't know. But this movie is just as bad as the first one. I gotta drink some water. It's crazy. So a lot of I really don't even want to talk about this movie. I debated not talking about it once I saw it, but I'm gonna get through some of the points that I had about it because it does have some good points to it, and some interesting like evolutions that have carried forward because it's again a sequel to the Return of the Return no the Pink Panther Strikes Again, PP3. It's a sequel to PP3, and it follows along with some of the same ideas as PP3 and expands on those ideas. So it has that going for it, but on the most part, no, it's not. It's not as good. It's not as good as Return of the Pink Panther. It's not as good as Pink Panther Strikes Again by any means at all. Okay, so credits for PP4. Directed, written by Blake Edwards, Frank Waldman, and a guy called Ron Clark. Cinematography is done by a guy called Ernest Day. He did an okay job. Again, just I'll get into that a little bit, but it's just the whole movie on the whole is very has this like substandard feeling, which it's weird to say that because these movies have this amazing quality about them that they're always timeless, but this, along even more so than the very first one, is just not up to the same mark as the Pink Panther Strikes Again or Return of the Pink Panther. So you have Peter Sellers coming back as Clouseau. You have Herbert Lom back as Dreyfuss, which if you see the Pink Panther Strikes Again will seem very odd to you. You have Diane Cannon as Simone Legree. You have Robert Webber as Philippe Duvier, and you have Bert Kwok back as Cato. I really hope I'm saying Bert's name correctly. Otherwise, I'm sincerely sorry. So, I think the main problem that happens is when this movie starts off not with a really funny comedic scene or any sort of scene that carries on or gives you information about the previous movie, wherein the Return of the Pink Panther, you get the stealing of the Pink Panther, you get an introduction to Clouseau, you get all sorts of things that kind of put you into this world. And in the Pink Panther Strikes Again, you get the whole scene at the psychiatric hospital, which gives you just an immediate push into the story. With this movie, it almost felt like I was watching the wrong movie because it starts off like this weird crime drama about killing people and showing force and trying to run a criminal enterprise, and it felt really out of place in a Pink Panther movie. Then there was like, that's the thing, there was nothing funny about it, which is, it bothers me so much when I see these movies and I think, where are the jokes? This movie is only about being funny. And when you're not making it funny, you're doing a disservice to everyone who's come to watch this movie and kind of the whole franchise that this is based on. So it starts off really strange with, just it's this weird crime drama beginning, like I'm watching Narcos or something, like, and it was just really, really silly. And I wasn't put off by the beginning because I knew that, okay, the beginnings are not always strong in these movies and this takes some time to pick up. But I was on the wrong foot for sure. Then you have the title sequence. So this title sequence is probably my least favorite out of every one of them. Just not as good. I really don't want to shit on this movie too much. I have some other things that I want to talk about which are better, but there's not a lot. The title sequences are not as good, not as creative. Definitely has some visual complexity to it, but wherein the other title sequences felt like, real cinematic visual experiences, this title sequence felt more like an episode of the cartoon. And if anyone who's seen the cartoon will know that what I'm talking about. It just felt like, okay, they got a lot of these moments together and they just strung them together as one piece. And that it just felt kind of cheap, because the other ones always put a lot of specific effort into creating these experiences and these narratives for the title sequence, where this one just felt like a collection of little moments and it didn't really have the same punch as the previous ones did. Yeah, and they also do something in terms of music for this title sequence where they've affected the music before in the other movies and I've not minded, but in this movie they add an electric guitar to the Pink Panther song, and I just did not like that at all. Not one bit. It was probably the worst thing you could do to affect the Pink Panther song, and I was not for it at all. So the main problem with this movie, I think, is tonal problems. And it comes down to I don't know what happened, but they just lost the eye on the story again. There are scenes where, so just like in the previous movie, at one point, there are people who are trying to kill Clouseau again, and a bunch of assassins are hired, and they show up outside the main villain of this movie, Philippe Duvier. They show up at his office, and they have a big fight scene, and it has the same tropes as the previous movies' fight scenes, where they have some cool slow mo, they have some cool, action and like pretty solid visual moments, but there's no personality to it. There's no reason for it. It just kind of happens. And there's also no sound, like there's sound design in the sense that you can hear the punching sound, like oh, punching sound effects and stuff like that. But there's no music, there's no like panache to it, no style. Like in the Cato fight scenes, there's always a little bit of a, musical twinge to it, kind of to give you this mood. But in this sequence, there's nothing. It just sort of happens like tonk tonk. You just keep hearing punching sound effects, and then it's over. And then the scene just ends. And you feel like, okay, or I just watch. I didn't even fully absorb the full fight scene because it was so plain to watch. Wherein the Cato scenes, I can probably recite to you what happens for them, like shot by shot, because I was so involved with what was happening. Just with the simple addition of music, I think. Again, similar to the first movie, you have these super long dramatic sequences with Philippe Duvier, the villain, and his mistress. And they have it in this movie to kind of set up the conflict that happens later on in the movie, but like we've had sequences with the dramatic actors and dramatic characters in Return of the Pink Panther, and they find a way to make it interesting and kind of fit tonally with the movie. And this is just not a good example of that. It's like a completely separate movie is going on, and I feel like I'm bored watching it. I don't feel like watching this movie. I came here to watch a fun movie with Clouseau being a stupid detective and, get into a hijink. But instead, I'm watching these guys in a boardroom talking about, selling drugs and being, what do you call, being not respectful to women and just not being nice guys. And it's like, it felt weird to watch it. It felt really weird. Felt like I was watching the wrong movie. And just a lot of scenes with Philip Duvier and even sometimes his girlfriend, just all of those story points that were kind of setting up the later points in the story to not much of a payoff, by the way, just didn't make a lot of sense for me in this movie. It didn't add anything to it. It pushed the story along in the sense that it just ties in later, but it didn't really add anything to the story as the scenes with Christopher Plummer would have, or the scenes with Dreyfuss would have from the two previous movies. So the one of the good things about this movie is that it gives Cato a real chance to finally shine in a movie. This is the first movie where Cato is not immediately sent off to hospital because of some kind of explosion, and he is given a full speaking role and a full character role where he is able to be involved in the story in a big way. He's still sidelined up for most of the movie and treated like really, really badly by Clouseau, but at least he's able to talk and express his opinions, which he has not got in the previous movies. But with that comes a little bit of a downside. Because they have Cato try to be a part of the story, they try and make a lot of scenes kind of perform with him only and no Clouseau, and they're bullshit because Cato is not funny on his own. Clouseau is the driving source behind all of the comedy in these movies, and without him, these movies aren't funny. And they've tried to make it funny without him because they think, okay, that's the solution, is that we just replace one funny actor with another, and it doesn't work. And yeah, I've written down where they've tried to attempt comedy with Cato and it doesn't work. Clouseau is 100% the reason why these movies are funny, and I guess they tried to make it without him, and it didn't work. The scenes with Clouseau, hands down, hilarious. Like some little bit of a racist, like there's a little bit of racism in the humor there, but it's still funny. It's not funny. It's just it's not as funny as the previous movies. It's a lot of cheap jokes and a lot of okay, this will definitely get a laugh because of how like simple it is and how basic it is, but not really how genuinely funny it is and how genuinely well it fits into the reality of the story and reality of the scene. Wow, it was like a burp. It's like a burp hiccup that I just had. So weird. Um, okay, yeah. You have Dreyfuss coming back in this movie, which if you watch the the Pink Panther Strikes Again, you will know makes no sense, and they make kind of a subtle reference to that. I'm not gonna spoil really why it makes no sense that Dreyfuss is back because I feel like it'll be a little funny reveal for yourself when you do watch the movies. And it's wide knowledge that Dreyfuss comes back in this movie, and he's definitely, if not a main character, a B character in this movie. So he's in it quite a bit, but he's just not used as well as he is in the previous movie. It's like they took 5 steps forward in the previous movie and then 10 steps backward. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what Ron Clark did to drug Blake Edwards and Frank Waldman, but he did a good job, and he wrote a really substandard movie for them, and just not as good. There is one favorite joke which I had, which I made a point of noting, is the introduction of the Silver Hornet, which is Clouseau's constantly collapsing car, which is very, very overdue for a service. And it is the one recurring joke in the movie that I find really funny. It's this like extremely lavish, like over-designed like toy Batmobile looking car, and it's has all these like fancy decals on it, and it's made almost out of complete like silver or metal, and it's all brushed metal. It's not painted or anything, and every time Clouseau gets into it and shuts the door, the whole car collapses and every piece of the car falls off. And It's one of those simple, funny jokes that fits into the reality of the story and fits into the reality of the movie. And probably one of my only favorite jokes from the entire movie. There are a few which are like funny, but not like funny. They're fine. They're not as funny as previous moments in previous movies. The Silver Hornet is one that definitely stood out to me. So yes, that's it. Those were the Pink Panther Strikes Again and Revenge of the Pink Panther. That is the final one of the Peter Sellers Pink Panther movies that I'm going to talk about. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about these movies. I hope you go watch these movies. I think, if not all four, two out of the four are definitely like some of the best comedies of all time. They're timeless and they're hilarious, and I think you should watch them. I will put the time codes in the description. I will put links to any of these movies if I can find them online. But these are almost the very old movies. So I think your best bet is to find a way to watch them online streaming. I'm not sure if any streaming service has them, but I'm sure you'll be able to find them online because that's just so old and the internet has everything. Yeah, I think that's it. Watch the Pink Panther with Peter Sellers. Steve Martin's great, but he's no Peter Sellers. And thanks for watching. Yeah, bye.